It's about that time to grab your favorite snack and sit back and relax because you are now listening to the Movie Time podcast with your hosts, LOWKEY Geek Renee Zalata and Blake the Wolf. Take it away, boys.
Hey, what's up, everybody? It's time for Movie Time, another episode coming at ya. What's up? You got myself, Renee, LOWKEY Geek here, and my buddy Blake the Wolf. What is going on, my brother?
Renee, we talk about movies. It's 90 degrees outside. This is AC movie season, where sometimes you just go to the movies just to get out of the heat. I can't believe it's already July. What are we? Are you ready to get into this? Talking about movies of the year so far.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's 90 degrees out, 80% humidity. So of course we're loving every freaking moment of it. But yeah, we're halfway through with the year, and prior to us going live on this recording, we were discussing how many movies we've seen this year so far, and it's mind-blowing how much we've seen so far.
Yeah.
It's kind of scary, actually, but it also reminds me of another friend of mine told me the other day that there's just too many damn movies coming out. It's hard for like the normal Joe to catch up, and I wonder if that has a lot to say about what we're seeing in the current box office right now, where certain movies that we thought were going to do well aren't, or there's delays in movies gaining steam. Like I'm noticing now that Little Mermaid and Elemental actually are doing well, but weeks after their initial release. So
they're catching up over time after they've binged 3 shows on Netflix and waited till it was convenient, kind of thing. Yeah, that kind of makes sense. And then word of mouth on those might be decent.
Yeah,
I went to Little Mermaid a week ago and it was full.
Really?
Like theater full at like a 9 p.m. Friday night kind of thing. Maybe 2 weeks ago, but still.
That's a long time afterwards. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. That's normally after opening night and opening weekend. A movie isn't full unless it's fucking Everything Everywhere All at Once, Avatar 1, that kind of thing. Like full hype train, full speed. That was interesting to me to see. And so there's something to that. And then we're also in like AC movie season.
Yeah.
I'm sorry that your friend has a problem of too many movies that they have to choose from. What an awful problem. Go to the movies more. We're going to go Matt Damon on it. Like you can see 2 movies in one weekend, bro.
Right.
But there's also a lot of like middling movies right now.
Sure.
Between the hot ones. We've had some hot ones and we've had some that are more mediocre.
Right.
Or like, we would talk about how R-rated comedies are having a little moment right now. And there's certain movies that you're not necessarily drop everything, go see it. It's not Oppenheimer Barbie weekend, but if you want to get out of the heat, there's plenty of movies to watch, and that's a good problem to have.
Absolutely. Yeah, there is definitely an abundance of options. And school's out too, so a lot more kids and families have the opportunity to actually go out and enjoy movies, not necessarily on weekends, but if they wanted to make a weeknight out of it, that's more doable. So it'll be interesting just to see how July and August play out, because July is probably the biggest month this year for movies. If we're to look at what's really coming out, we have pretty much the major tentpoles for the summer coming out. You have Tom Cruise with his Mission Impossible. You have Christopher Nolan with his Oppenheimer. And now you have Greta Gerwig and Margot Robbie's Barbie, which has been like the talk of the industry right now.
I'm so mad you got that one in the draft. Looking back, I read a couple things that were like Oppenheimer should make a whole bunch more than Barbie, and then now it's flipped completely.
Yeah.
Where, especially after Christopher Nolan described Oppenheimer as essentially a horror movie, people are like, that's going to limit its box office potential. A lot of people just don't go when they hear that word.
Right.
I'm going to go anyway, but I am one of those people in a way where I could have skipped a Beau is Afraid or a Midsommar or whatever, just because that word is kind of loosely attached to it.
Yeah.
So you might actually finally have a decent weekend that weekend. We'll see, but you might get a little momentum because I've been kicking your ass.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry
well,
about that. But
no, it's all good. I mean, speaking of which, let's just quickly go over that. Might
uh,
as well,
I don't
because we
know.
haven't like caught up on it
It's
recently.
hard for me to like talk to you while you look at these numbers. I just feel bad.
It's all good. It's all good because again, you were heavily you were weighed heavily in the beginning of summer with your
Sure,
choices, as
sure.
opposed to mine, where a lot of my stuff comes in later. So, as of right now, the current standings are Blake with a global box office number of $2.3 billion in the bank.
I get to
The
keep all that. Cool.
I wish we could. That would be fantastic if we could, or at least get 1% of it. That would be amazing. But yours are being led by Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which again, no
Mm.
surprise there, with 838 million at the global box office. Fast X is second with 721 million. And third is Across the Spider-Verse at 617 million there. So
Sweet.
Book Club still
Nice.
hanging strong at 27 million. No movement,
Hell yeah.
but it's in there.
We'll see. There will be a resurgence. Just wait. Once book club season really starts, Scholastic Book Fair era.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll see. It's gonna
Yeah.
get to that 100 million that I said it would. You'll see.
Indiana Jones at 158 million, which I think this is again one of those movies we thought was going to do a lot more.
Yeah.
But not a lot of people showing up for that one. And Asteroid City,
Maybe the word of mouth
huh?
will help on that because like the expectations were real low.
Yeah,
They were
yeah,
high, and then after Cannes, weird place to put out a movie like
yeah,
that. Let's just
yeah.
say, if you're doing like some like kind of corny blockbustery kind of thing, don't do Cannes. They're going to be very critical and
No,
French about it.
yeah,
Do something else. And then but then people who see it are like,
Mm.
it's not bad. Like it's a solid Indiana Jones. We talked
It's
through this one
mixed.
recently,
It's one of those that's definitely split down the middle, like for sure. And I feel like
but it's not like Like if you want an Indiana Jones movie, this is an Indiana Jones movie for
it
sure. It
is. It
is.
is. Yeah, it is. It's. I guess it's a question of was it the Indiana Jones movie that most people wanted, and I think
Sure.
that's really where expectations fall into place. And I had someone who commented on the review saying they said the movie wasn't awful, but they didn't like the way Indiana Jones the character was treated in it.
Yeah.
So
Well,
there's a
it's not
lot of that
1983 is
criticism.
part of the problem also. So
Yeah,
unfortunately, only so much you can do there. But for 2023 Indiana Jones, anyway, we don't need
yeah,
to relitigate that whole conversation.
right.
Um, yeah,
But
I'm glad we're
yeah,
going through this list because that's what we're talking about today.
mhm.
Do you want to look at your numbers? How are you doing over there, bud?
Yeah, like right before we do that, I just wanted to also note that Asteroid City at 33 million for global, I think that's a pretty decent number for a Wes Anderson flick, right? But what was the budget on that though? I mean, with that star power and I'm sure the expensive cameras that he's used for the filming of something like that.
What I'm seeing is $25 million, which is
That's
hilarious
it.
because yeah, because everyone's taken the minimum
They take
on
the
these types
cut
of
just
movies.
to be on a Wes Anderson flick.
Yeah, no, I'm not kidding at all. And it's part of it's the cut, and maybe they're not taking the minimum.
Hmm.
Usually in a movie like this, there'll be some stars who say, "You got to pay me, but then you can pay everyone else less," kind of thing.
Right.
And that's not what this cast is. I don't know that there's any of the like. I'm assuming even a Tom Hanks. Maybe this is part of the reason it's the first time he gets to Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks is in a
Hmm.
little bit of a lull. He's got his money. He's doing okay. He's
Yeah.
like, and then you promise them an actors camp in Spain, if I
Right.
recall,
Yep.
where it's
Hmm.
like, oh, hey, do you want to hang out with 20 of your best friends and we'll pay you a little money for it? People, yeah, I would. Maybe other people would have paid money to be there, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure that that's something that an actor would have paid for if they weren't being paid for the movie, right?
Right.
So I could see that being a big pay cut situation. So it's grossed 10 million, which is kind of terrible
It's
for
it's
any movie,
it's
but for a Wes
well,
Anderson indie,
yeah,
it's hard to be mad about that.
For a Wes Anderson indie that's being distributed by a major studio. with not that much marketing. There wasn't like a really big slur of marketing, not like how we've seen like The Flash or Indiana Jones or anything to that
Well, I think they
level.
sent all the Instagram ads directly to me because that's all I saw for a couple
You
weeks. They knew I
and
was
yeah, and me
they knew I was
included,
hyped for it.
because freaking Letterboxd at one point had nothing but Asteroid City ads flooding
Yeah.
the page. So it was just fascinating to see. But
In context, part of the reason I thought it would do better, Grand Budapest Hotel, $173 million in worldwide box office. So by
interesting.
comparison, this is trash, like 1/6 of
Gotcha.
that, a
Right,
little
right,
like
right.
1/5, whatever. But um, that said, it's still not a terrible pull for any indie movie when some
No.
big budget movies are losing hundreds of millions. So it's not
Yeah.
I'm sure the studio isn't mad.
Yeah. Well, it also goes. It begs the question: are these movies, are these studios spending too much money on budgets on film? And I feel like that's another conversation to have at another time, because,
You can make a
woof,
great movie for less money than some of these movies are being made for.
yeah,
That's for sure.
absolutely. And we're seeing it like with the effects of Indiana Jones and The Flash, which I think at this point it's safe to say that is probably one of the biggest flops as far as like comic book superhero movies are concerned. As we look at my list, because it did have The Flash on it, because I was expecting it to do gangbusters. It's only at 249 million globally. It just finally crossed over the 100 million mark this past week, which is really sad that it took that long to do so. But
It
yeah,
doesn't get better from here usually. It's
no,
not like, oh, the fifth week it'll really get another 100 mil.
yeah,
Um, I wonder what these numbers would be if we did the profitability of a movie, like if we subtracted budget from it,
right.
because there's some movies on here that would just really sink. Maybe that's a project for next year when we draft 2024.
Yeah. No, I mean, I could say right now, I'm pretty sure my Flash option would be in the red
Yeah.
dramatically at this point. But no, and I have Transformers: Rise of the Beast with a respectable 384 million globally. Little Mermaid, the big surprise so far on my list, which has 527 million globally. That was one of the movies that we weren't expecting to hit that much, especially after its initial release. But like we said earlier, it has legs. Like you saw it a couple weeks ago.
Don't say Little Mermaid has legs.
Come on.
That feels rude. Like by the end, it has legs. It just took a little while.
Yeah, it just took a while to get there. It had to discover itself, and its true meaning in the movie lexicon. And then Elemental at 195 million. So, but I have a lot of movies on here that haven't come out yet. So, I'm very curious.
I have 4 that have come out. You have. Wait. Oh, I'm looking at my. Oh, I see. Damn.
No,
I looked at it incorrectly. I had to scroll down a little. Shit.
You
I
have
have 2 more movies than
6.
you, but I'm winning by $1 billion dollars. And
I know.
Mission Impossible might be what jumps you because all my top 4 have all come out, and then Barbie. If that's your 2, 3, 4, 5, the 5th one,
Yeah,
that's my Barbie and Mission Impossible in whatever it is 2 weeks. You might just be kicking my butt unless
we'll see.
TMNT does Gangbusters or Joyride. Why did I?
Well, you never know.
Relitigate a couple of these.
You never know, because again, our expectations on certain box office never came into fruition with some of our choices. So one of these could like completely turn around and be monumental without us realizing. But one thing to also note, because I think one of the first conversations we had when the summer box office season started was a lot of industry insiders, a lot of cinema owners. They were saying that in order for the summer to be successful for them domestically, they have to cross the $4 billion mark. And given that we are in July just started, domestically, we're looking at 1.6 billion. So they're really far off the mark right now.
We got some weeks left to make up for it. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. But I don't know. It's interesting to see where box office lands now compared to how it was, the landscape of how it was like 5 years ago, 6 years ago. It's like night and day. And again, we could have another episode where that talks about Well, streaming is definitely eating away at stuff. People who got used to watching movies at home during the pandemic, you know, ticket prices, of course, still being extremely expensive in a lot of markets. Maybe the abundance of movies coming out also play into the factor in there, because not everyone is like you and I. Some people, regularly will see a movie, what, once a month, maybe once every other month. We're seeing movies sometimes twice a week. We're definitely the exception to the rule there. But with that being said, speaking of seeing movies, there is a certain movie that comes out this week called Joyride, that happens to appear on your list, that I thought it would be nice for us to quickly talk about, especially since we talked about No Hard Feelings in a previous episode, and how it's nice to see R-rated comedies kind of making a comeback or attempting to. And No Hard Feelings was a pretty decent attempt at bringing back the R-rated comedy with that like 90s feel, like the late 90s type of feel and all that. With Joyride hitting theaters this weekend, what were your I don't know if I had high expectations on this movie. I just thought there were a lot of beats in the trailer that had me laughing pretty hard. And I thought this was going to be one of those really great, funny movies. But I don't think I was expecting to like it as much as I did at the end of the day. So what were your thoughts and expectations going into it?
For Joyride.
For Joyride, yeah.
I went into it with higher hopes than kind of what I got. I did laugh a lot. It was a pretty empty theater, so the laughs kind of they echoed a bit too much. I wish it had been a full theater, and especially considering I was seeing it the opening night it came out, it would have been really nice to. And there were some theaters in the city that were full. Just the Showtime I went to, the late one, smaller theater, it wasn't that. It had maybe 10 people in it or so. Didn't hear much laughter even from those folks. That said, I enjoyed the hell out of it. I thought it was fun, and it was that exact same kind of like spunky, Hangover, super bad, book smart, like that, whatever that R-rated comedy is, where I can't believe they're saying these things.
Yeah.
And overall, I'm gonna go and say I liked it. I think I gave it a 3.5 or a 4 on Letterboxd. I have a couple little gripes with it, that there was some jokes that fell pretty flat, at least for me, and no one else laughing in the theater, which makes it fall flatter. There's a couple like weird editing decisions where the movie felt a little choppy at times, not terribly so. But I think mainly I'm kind of tired of the buddy road trip movie where they have a falling out and I'm just waiting for them to get back together and do the big speech. Maybe that's just the mood I was in, and there's sometimes where those hit me right, and maybe if I'm looking for that, you go through life experiences and sometimes you're looking for certain storylines and other times you're not. So maybe that's on me. But every beat of the plot was fairly predictable, even though the shenanigans were so wild. And it felt very like there was a time when the Hangover movies and the Will Ferrell movies and all of those, where it was just how ludicrous can you get?
Right.
And there's a few moments in here where it was overly silly and less grounded in reality. And I wish it had a touch more Apatow, that thing where it's more sentimental and less over the top ridiculous. Just been a little more grounded in reality. But I'm not trying to say it didn't have that. There were some very touching moments. I even got emotional at a certain scene. So overall, I think it was a successful film. I did laugh a lot. And if you're making me laugh in the movie theater, that's going to help boost my view of it. Even like 3 or 4 chuckles. It's like, okay, that's for a comedy, especially in a mostly empty theater. That's tough to do. If it's not funny, it's not funny. This one was pretty fucking funny.
Yeah.
Just overall, I wish it had been a better overall piece of film work, and there was a couple things lacking that I think held it back from that for me. But still, yeah, I gave it 4 on Letterboxd. It's a good movie. I think part of the problem is my expectations were a little too high going into it. Because
Okay.
I like these types of movies often, and that's a problem that I have, where I want to love it even more. Did you already say your score?
I didn't. No. I gave it a 5, dude. I
Wow.
yeah, I
Mister
was
never gives 5s. You're the professor that's like, unless it's wow.
I was 90% of the movie I was in tears, whether I was laughing so hard
Huh.
or getting emotional during the emotional beats and all that. This was
Yeah.
a movie that had it all for me. And I don't disagree. It is kind of a formula that we've already seen before where you have your hangovers, you have your bridesmaids, you have like those type of movies where you got a group of friends who you may know well or may not know so well going through some sort of adventure together, and then by the end of it they become besties or whatever the case is. They have the huge bonding moment. Plus you add in movies like, I compared it to Road Trip and Euro Trip from the 90s because they are going on a road trip type of adventure, and all in Asia. So you got that element in there where you have a culture that's being included. I think for me too, what really hit me hard was that these were not just women, but they were Asian women, and I
That
don't
was
think we've gotten that at all. So for me, that was very important and impactful to see that. Yeah, it's not only white dudes that have to get themselves in these type of troubles. You got these Asian women who are, full on debauchery like hell, and it was just so refreshing to see them being so open and free like that. My theater was dying a lot throughout a lot
how
of
full
moments.
how full was your theater?
I would say like my theater was probably half full.
Not
Yeah,
bad.
which is not bad,
Especially these
especially
days, yeah.
yeah, especially it was I actually saw it during a sneak preview that they did on a weekend. It was like a Saturday night, and it was a one showing only thing, a 7 p.m. on a Saturday night in Queens
I should have done
at
that.
at
Yeah.
the Kaufman Studios. You know exactly where I go. But it's a movie that I personally don't think has a lot of hype going into it.
Yeah.
And to see it half full, I was actually pretty surprised by that alone. Not a lot of Asians, so it was definitely
I was gonna
more
say
of
it was a good place to see that rather than my theater,
yeah,
but maybe not. That's interesting.
yeah,
Okay.
not a lot of Asians, but a lot of people were dying. But I think I laughed more. I was the one laughing the most when it comes to the more of the Asian centric jokes or the stereotypical stuff that they were poking fun at. A lot of stuff that happened with the Asian family and the gathering, and certain parents. Like I was really dying a lot of that stuff, and I think I was the only one because I could relate to a lot of those things. So I think another reason why I rated it so high was due to the fact that it was so relatable for me. Like because again, being exposed to that culture, being someone who's mixed and also at a certain time of his life exploring more of a certain culture that he's a part of that I wasn't really exposed to. I can kind of relate to a lot of those moments in the film. So I think that's one of the reasons why it hit me more so than maybe most, but I loved it. I thought it was a great combo of all those things that really shocked the hell out of me.
Overall, I think on the representation thing and seeing a different type of story, we can't blame this movie that some of the tropes that it's leaning into are a little tired now
Yeah.
when this movie wasn't going to be created by any studio in
Hmm.
America. However, like if we recall, Bridesmaids was revolutionary because what people would say was women can't be the stars of comedies because women aren't funny. Like that's not
Right.
very far in our rearview mirror. And I know there's people on Twitter right now saying that, and probably in threads any minute now it'll be a trending topic of people just trying to say some wild shit about that.
Right.
But the fact that even a group of mostly white women in Bridesmaids that was groundbreaking is
Hmm.
bonkers. And
Yeah.
so this movie coming out after some of those other movies have already taken some of the jokes or like plot points and a scene where they do drugs and it's trippy or some sex overly sexual or bathroom humor or whatever and like oh it's so shocking. It would have been shocking if this movie could have been released sooner.
Sure.
There was also something really nice about I think anytime I'm learning about another culture or seeing people talk about it from the inside, which is something that the main character is going through, where she's saying, "Oh, I am not now the Asian girl. I'm now just a girl when I am in this country."
Right.
And there's some. It got pretty deep at a few moments, and then they would interrupt us. Even the deepest moment, there's a character who runs in and says something crazy. Um, I did enjoy like how committed they were to the comedy of it all.
Yeah.
That said, that was one moment too where I was like, I just wanted to like feel that for a moment, and they
Mm.
didn't allow
And
it.
then like
Where it
smacked
felt
you
a
in the
little
face with
choppy.
something else, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the editing was a little clunky at moments like that. That said, that's what this movie is and it's trying to be. So I think it was successful at what it was trying to be, and it was really nice seeing another perspective in these types of comedies because Lord
Hmm.
knows that we've gotten most of like every version of the white dude
Yeah.
version of this movie, every possible iteration. And then also, let's talk about how like in the Hangover series, right? Ken Jeong is a character
Hmm.
who is looking back has been kind of maligned, and people have edited clips and saying like how messed up is it that this character was in at the
Yeah.
time the most successful movie of that year or something. Um, and then if we're talking about Short Round with Ke Huy Quan winning the Oscar last year, even though his character, right? This is it's nice to see in this moment. I think in 2023.
Hmm.
Is it too late? Yeah. Should it have been an issue before? No, it should not have been. But it is cool seeing. I honestly love the cast. I thought they each did a great job.
Yeah.
And there's a couple moments early on I'm going like, okay, I haven't seen this person before. I don't know who they are. Are they? And then each by the end, each member of the cast won me over as at least for what they were cast to do.
Yeah.
Some of the characters more ridiculous than others, but I really enjoyed getting a whole new perspective in this already comedy genre, especially a genre that for a while felt pretty damn played out.
Hmm.
And it's almost like they tried every little iteration of it of okay, what if one of them is gay and one of them is straight? What if they are pretending to be gay? Okay, but what if they're on a road trip through America? But now, what if that road
Right.
trip goes to Italy? Every version of it,
Yeah.
and then now it's like, wait, what if we cast an Asian woman? What if we cast 4 Asian
Or
women?
Asian women.
Yeah, and then now we get to actually go into that same genre, and we talked about it recently with No Hard Feelings, where
Yeah.
it's doing more punching up, or it's the people who are making jokes are the people who are allowed to make those jokes, if you will, and that makes a huge difference, right?
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
definitely different when you're talking about your own dirty laundry than when someone else, someone who looks like me, is talking about the dirty laundry or the stereotype or whatever. So it felt fresh in that regard, and that was one of my favorite things about the movie to have a fresh R-rated comedy.
Yeah. No, for sure. And I like the fact that you and I we both agree with the cast itself because outside of Stephanie Sue, I was not familiar with anybody else on this cast. Now, I've heard of Ashley Park before because she is very well known more on the TV side of things and streaming. I think she's attached to some very popular shows there, but it shows that I normally would just not watch. It's just not my cup of tea, right? But then I remember hearing Florence Pugh mentioning her name as far as like who she would like to collaborate with, especially like, Florence Pugh is known for doing her own like cooking shows and all that. And she said that she would love to have Ashley Park join in on one of those shows because it's going to be chaotic and it's going to be like a crazy fun time. So I was wondering, I was like, oh, why is that? I wonder why she thinks that way. And then now seeing a movie like this, I'm like, holy shit. I now I want to see more of her doing other stuff that I'm willing to watch. Not like these like teen or young adult type of like stuff, rom com stuff that she does on streaming and Netflix and all that. But I would love to see further adventures of these women just in general. Like if they were to do like Joyride Part 2 or whatever the case is. I mean,
Which we got that was almost teased at the end. I was like,
right.
please, if for no other reason, I just want to see these 4 women hanging out in Paris.
Yeah.
At least one more movie. Let's give it a shot. I
Hmm.
hope that this makes enough money that the studio goes green light it and that these actors are available.
Yeah.
Which part of the problem with casting and representation is that sometimes these actors are too available.
Right.
So maybe that's an option is you get a franchise going. I would honestly love to see that.
Yeah.
I would sign up for the sequel immediately if they're able to make it.
No, for sure. And Last thing I'll mention here too is because the director who did this is the same director who did Crazy Rich Asians. Did you see that movie? Because I didn't.
I don't want to. I'm not trying to correct you on the record, but my understanding, because there was some talk of like the producer or the writer who made it.
Uh
So I'm
huh.
just gonna fact check this real quick. Crazy Rich Asians, directed by John M. Chu, and
Oh, did she write
Joyride.
it?
It has to be something like that. And I'm trying to. I
Okay.
was actually sussing that out while you were talking a second ago.
Okay.
Um, but so that is listed in her credits. So she wrote Crazy
Gotcha.
Rich
Okay.
Asians and directed Joyride.
Gotcha. Okay. So she was attached to what some would say was probably a very important movie for Asian representation. Um, I don't agree with
The
that.
first major Hollywood studio to feature a majority cast of Chinese descent
Yeah.
in a modern setting since Joy Luck Club. So I
Right.
think
Right.
it is groundbreaking in its way, or at
Right.
least barely broken ground and making money and
Right.
and also challenging questions of representation the way that other movies have for other groups in recent years.
Right. Right. So the reason why I didn't watch Crazy Rich Asians is because I didn't like the fact that it did play on that stereotype about wealth and money and how important it is in certain Asian cultures.
So you didn't
And
watch it at all?
no, never saw it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I was just not interested in it because of that type of subject matter. Because again, that is something that I was always exposed to as far as especially within the Chinese culture, how much importance wealth is put into a family or a life or success. I didn't like the fact that it kind of played off of that. And then you have reality shows like was it the Hung Dynasty or Chang Dynasty or whatever the case is, where it's just a bunch of rich wives, Asian wives, and they have their own like little housewives kind of reality show. And that was like a big thing on Netflix or something like that. So I didn't like the fact that it played off of those things. The reason why I bring that up is because now you have this movie, which I think is a better entry point as far as Asian representation is concerned, because you got normal Asian women doing what could be
Covers a
considered
wide
as
variety of
normal things.
dynamics of different
Right,
types of people too. And so not even just normie, like the character of Deadeye, right, is representing a different type of like
right.
sexuality or gender
Hmm.
identity. I'm not sure because I don't think that they fully explained it in the
They
movie,
didn't.
but
No.
there's that. There's a question of adoption and then which country you're from and which country your parents are from and what's it like being the only Asian girl in your school and what that
Hmm.
meant to them and them talking about that. That's a huge point of the movie is that's why they were friends essentially, and
Yeah.
then talking about being outsiders, etc. But there's one of them who is very sexual, one of them who's more the success, career-minded person, one of them is more artistic,
Yeah.
one who's in. There's a couple of them who are arts, and then one who's just a proper nerd. And I think another movie, especially if you only get one token character, then there might only be one version of those things represented. And historically, we can see something where it's like, oh, they are overly sexualized
Right.
or they're the nerd and the one
Hmm.
who's a geek and career minded, the straight A student, whatever, just leaning into whichever of these stereotypes, right? And in this one, we got a wide array from each of the different friends having their own little angle on what their experience was like. So that is a good point as opposed to Crazy Rich Asians, that
Right.
this one had a more diverse, and then socioeconomics and how successful their parents were, how successful they are. It was
Hmm.
all over the place. And then they even talked about while they were in China of there's China, and then there's
Yeah.
China, and then even in the airport they're saying, okay, this is how you identify the different
Yeah.
groups of
Oh my
people. And they
God,
all
that
know
was
they're Western.
so hilarious. Because again, I have relatives. I'd known people who we had the same conversation, and it was just so damn funny for me.
So they're basically getting into the nuance of all of that, and even
Hmm.
within the dialogue and the jokes they're making to each other,
Yeah.
that was nice to see, um, and it makes it for a more interesting cast, or like when you have the different moving parts and how they interact with each other, it
Hmm.
makes it for more dynamic relationships between the people who come from different backgrounds and can talk to each other similarly and have similar experiences, but also have some differences. So I think that adds a dynamic to it that Crazy Rich Asians didn't have.
Right. Yeah. But you did you see it?
Yeah, of
Okay.
course.
Like, did you think it was funny? I don't know what your thought on the movie was. So
Yeah, we weren't doing this back then.
yeah.
One thing I'll say is I think a lot of people are hard, and this is, I think, partially my white privilege speaking.
Okay.
So I know that I'm not trying to say that everyone needs to agree with this, but my perspective from my privileged vantage point is a lot of people are very hard on their own community's creative output,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll say, "Oh, that's not a perfect representation," or "This has this flaw and that flaw."
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, what I'll say is, like, white people have been making all types of bullshit for centuries longer, and there are movies that are about rich white people and poor white people and everything in between, and like we've had just such like a monopoly on the entertainment industry for so long. I think it's okay to make movies about different experiences, even though they might not be reflective of everyone's experiences. I do agree that this movie is, it's nice about this movie that there are more experiences reflected. But also I think partially if we're going to be making movies with representation of different cultures, that would include sometimes it's a thing that there's a director who I can't remember the name of the movie right now. You might even be able to recall it faster than I can. But it was essentially a group of young Asian boys who were rowdy. I think it was like the late 90s, early 2000s. And it's at a film festival and it did fairly well. It was kind of like a Tarantino style or inspired movie. And the director, this is kind of off memory, and I can't even remember the name of the movie now. Maybe by the
Mm-hmm.
end of this, I will. But it's about a group of very violent young Asian men, and yet it was like one of the few ever Hollywood movies that had an Asian cast and an Asian director.
Mm-hmm.
And people in the crowd were very, very angry. Some of them, and in Asian communities, were saying this is a bad representation of us. We don't want this to exist.
Okay.
And at the end of the day, I generally come down on freedom of expression, creative output, and having being able to show different things, even if it's morally bad, like the
Mm-hmm.
characters are morally bad. Because one thing the director's saying is that there are people like this who do exist, and if you're saying we shouldn't have movies that aren't morally good for everyone all the time, I land more on that end of things. So I'm willing to watch movies with bad guys in them and movies where the main character is a murderer, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so similarly, I'm willing to watch movies that where all of the characters happen to be very rich, or there's an outsider in there, but I think she's also has a privileged background. I can't even remember necessarily the dynamic, but there is one fish out of water in Crazy Rich Asians, and I think it's the female lead. Nonetheless, if someone wants to say that it is playing on stereotypes and that those are stereotypes are being self-perpetuated by the director and writer, that's not my conversation to have, and I honestly don't know enough about that issue to speak to it.
Mm-hmm.
That said, I think at the end of the day, what a lot of people said was they didn't love the capitalism of it, but they're glad that the movie exists nonetheless and is making money and is increasing, the amount of roles available in Hollywood's perception of what's possible for Asian characters and Asian filmmakers. I think at the end of the day that there is something to be said about that, regardless, and then how much where every person falls on where they're okay with that compromise kind of landing. I think it's up to the individual. But yeah, I did see it. Overall, I didn't think it was a great piece of cinema. I thought it was beautiful
Yeah.
and it was good to see and it was interesting. But I wasn't like blown away by the actual story. But it was something kind of nice about like a simple movie that
Mm-hmm.
isn't that we talk about like in the LGBTQ community stuff is that all the movies are heartbreaking, gay dramas, and just the saddest endings, and the love is usually faded and tragic. And sometimes it's nice to just see like a gay character in a gay movie where nothing is terribly tragic is happening and just like things are kind of pleasant overall. That I think there was something also nice about Crazy Rich Asians in that regard, that it was a pretty straightforward, not, I was going to say rom-com. I guess it's like a rom-com drama movie. But
Right.
anyway, I think I've ranted enough about a topic that's not even necessarily mine to begin with. But yeah, that was kind of my take on the things you were talking about.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. No, I was just curious because again, a lot of people that I know, um, when that movie came out, they were saying like that was like such a funny movie and one of the best comedies that they've seen. And it's nice to see Asians in comedies and all that. But I was just not one of those that felt that that was the type of comedy I wanted to see a full Asian cast in, especially with the subject matter involved and whatever the case. Maybe one day I'll watch it. Who knows? But I don't know. For me, I felt like Joyride was just a better, more superior type of comedy that I'd prefer to
I'll
see
go with
Asian
you.
representation on. Um,
Fully agree. For the record, the movie I was
yeah.
talking about was Better Luck Tomorrow. Just before
Oh,
we move
Better
on
Luck
too much.
Tomorrow. Okay.
Okay, yeah.
Gotcha.
And I remember
Okay.
this being a huge controversy and people talking about and defending like this movie should be allowed to exist.
Gotcha.
And that's the only thing I was really referencing was that conversation that I was aware of.
Right.
But yes, I interrupted you, and I do agree with you. At the end of the day, I'm not here saying
No.
Ride isn't superior. I honestly think overall, film wise, superior to Crazy Rich Asians, at least especially in that regard.
Yeah.
But please.
Okay. Awesome. Moving on. I think before we get into our main topic of conversation, as far as what our favorite movies of 2023 are so far, a movie that
Joyride's going to be on your list now that you just told
well,
me you gave it 5 stars.
well, I mean, one thing to note is there were certain movies that I rated 5 stars or 4 stars this year that may not necessarily be in my top movies of the year so far because of maybe uh, importance in film as far as I consider it, and long lasting impact. I would say. However, Joyride came out in July, so I'm not including it. So
Okay,
that is
fair
my
enough.
saving grace there as well. As
There we
far
go.
as
You don't have to worry about it. Okay.
yeah.
Also,
But yeah.
when you rank a movie, you're doing it based on just your enjoyment of the experience, like in the theater or your first time watching it, and you're not including those other things like
Oh no.
how great it is or
Uh,
artistic merit and longevity or whatever.
I include all of that stuff. It's just
Okay.
there are certain things that may hit me later on. And if it does, then I actually go back and readjust my rating based off of my feeling, which I know a lot of people don't do. But I do allow myself to do that because, and I will note it in the review. I would say, like, after some consideration, and I realized that this should have been rated this way because of X, Y, and Z, or whatever the case is. One of those movies is a movie that I'm going to bring up right now because you just saw it recently, and that is Past Lives. So we quickly talked about Past Lives in a previous episode because I had a chance to see it. You did not. And I mentioned, how gut wrenching it was for me, especially at the end. This was one of those movies that I gave it a lower rating, but it's a movie that's stuck in my head ever since I saw it. And after analyzing it in my head after a week or two, I went back and I increased my rating on the movie because of how impactful it was to me after the fact. And I haven't been seeing a lot of critics' top 10 list of the year so far, whatever the case is. But I did get hit with some on Twitter recently because I think everyone is doing that right now because we are in July. So I feel like that's the trend happening. Hence why we're doing it too. But it's something that I actually just thought about. A lot of people have included this in their top 10 list so far of the year. So I realize that I'm not surprised by that. But I'm curious as to, because you just saw it recently, what your thoughts on, just quick thoughts on the movie itself and how it may have affected your list of 2023.
Sure. So what's funny is you're talking about reassessing the movie.
Yeah.
And I was literally doing that while you were talking. And I was like, wait, why did I want to leave it? Because what we talked about was I want to make sure one of us is including it.
Right.
I was asking you, are you including it in yours? Because I looked at my list. I was like, I can't leave any of these off. And I thought Past Lives more recent, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And I was going to off. Now it's back on my list for the record. So if you want to talk about it at that point, we can. I'll have it kind of lower to the because of recency bias. And
yeah.
But while you were talking about it, I was thinking through it. I was feeling it again. I was like, I checked my Letterboxd score, 5 out of 5 stars. for whatever reason, I was kind of like downplaying it in my
Mm-hmm.
memory. I don't love the more drama, gut wrenching, but there was something really beautiful and subtle about it that you're
Yeah.
right is impacting me on when I'm looking back at it
Yeah.
more than it did in the theater. And apparently in the theater, I gave it 5 out of 5 stars after that experience. So it's back on the list, and I'm gonna have to drop something. It'll be tough.
Well, we'll give you some time to readjust your list and all that.
Thank
But
you. Thank you.
for that particular movie, for Past Lives, I did give it a 4 initially. And then I again, after a week or two of me just constantly thinking about it and reanalyzing the impact it left in my mind, I went back and I had to increase it to 5 because it's just one of those movies that, yeah, it was subtle, brilliantly done, but just I guess the impact on the subject matter alone really, really got me. And I keep thinking back again to how the movie ended and that last scene. Now that you've seen it, we can just quickly talk about it. How they're finally saying their goodbyes. And it was just like, oh, if it was another life, maybe things would have been different. And they kind of just like shrug it off and leave it that way. And as she's doing her, walk back to the apartment, you think, oh, she's in a place where she can just let it go and everything's okay. And then the minute she sees her husband, bam, she breaks down. And I was just like, what? Like, you're gonna do that to me right now? But that's
Yeah.
that's the feeling that I had. It's like, how can you be okay with that?
Mhm.
And you realize that, she wasn't. And it just all flooded out. And to end the movie that way, I just thought was so gut wrenching. Yeah, so that particular scene has stayed in my mind like this whole time, and because of that, I had to reanalyze and reevaluate my feeling of the movie.
I want to see more people do a pairing of movies that are tonally opposite.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying it's just because of the Asian thing, but like the fact that it was mainly Asian cast, or I guess with Past Lives, it's 2 of the 3 main actors,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
But it is an Asian storyline. But I want to see a pairing with Joyride and Past Lives because we've got woman moves to America at very young age
Yeah.
and is encountering destiny and what she's supposed to be doing with her life, and has she been wasting her time, and questions like that.
Mm-hmm.
That that's even though tonally, like one I laughed the whole time, the other one I cried the whole time.
Right. Right.
But I enjoyed that aspect of both movies. I think Past Lives, it is one of those. Someone asked me, like, what did it say to you? Like, did it speak to you where you're at in life,
Mm-hmm.
relationships, what you think about love? And for me, it was essentially it was more Rorschach than that. It's essentially whatever you're bringing to the movie.
Sure.
And there's not. It's difficult for movies to do this, but if you're dealing with heartbreak, love, you've divorced, you're in love with your wife, whatever version of it might be, it can speak to that because it's asking the question essentially of, do we believe in love as destiny? Do we believe in love as I make this choice and this daily commitment?
Mm-hmm.
And these are questions that people ask when they're making relationship decisions of, oh, I'm inspired by this person. Should I cheat? Should I leave my husband to be with the person who has my passion right now? Should you be passionately in love with your spouse every day for the rest of your life, or is it more of a grind than that?
Yeah.
And I think at the end of the day, it's not really making a case one way or the other. It's not the movie where everyone's going to leave with the same conclusion. It's just kind of
Right.
saying, like, these are all options. And I do think, and maybe this is my bias, I do think that the movie, some folks, someone I was talking to was acting like, what's it called, Anyan, the word that they're using for the Korean
Oh, the
concept.
Korean concept of what was it?
It's essentially something related to reincarnation, where you've met someone in a
Right.
past life and you have
Right.
experiences with them.
Yeah.
And if it's your spouse, then you have, I think it was 8,000 layers or levels of it. Um, and the person was acting like the movie believes in that concept, and I'm not sure that that's true. It is a concept that the movie is dealing with, and in a way, that is a like they are dealing with it as if it's something that they believe in. But then there's other
Mm-hmm.
times during the movie where they're saying, "Yeah, it's just a thing that somebody says to seduce somebody else,"
Yeah.
or they're playing with it like, "Well, what do you think the past lives would have been?" And that was one of my favorite scenes, is in the bar. The
Oh
husband is
yeah.
there,
Yep.
can't understand that the language that the other two characters are speaking, and he's just sitting there, and it was kind of tense and kind of beautiful and funny and tragic all at
Yeah.
the same time.
Oh yeah.
So they're saying, okay, I would have been a bird and you would have been the tree branch that I rested on before leaving.
Mhm.
It was very poetic.
Yeah.
Another one is that I would have been the queen and you would have been one of my servants, and we would have had an affair, and then you would have been beheaded or something like that.
Mhm.
Um, and then there were some more romantic versions of it. It was interesting, but then with the way it leaves so ambiguously, well, what do you think will be in our next life? And she said, I don't know. And then cries to her husband. Like that whole movie, the thesis is like right there. All of
Yeah.
those interactions.
Yeah.
It's so dense and charged. I really thought it was incredibly successful at doing that. So I'm excited to when we go through our lists of movie rankings to have that one in there now that I look back on it.
Yeah, no, for sure. And again, I think now that you've seen it, and they do reference it in the movie, the best way to describe the impact of this movie and describe what would you compare it to, the fact that they mention Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind is brilliant, because it is almost the same type of impact that I felt with when I saw that movie. So it is kind of brilliant in its own way that they kind of referenced it in the movie itself. But it is what you say. It is one of those perfect examples of everyone will take away something different from the movie because of what they've experienced themselves. And again, it speaks very well of just how cinema is in general, where it's like everyone's going to react to a movie very differently. Not everyone is. We're not a hive mind where one person thinks one thing and they were like, "Oh yeah, we all feel the same way about that." Like that's just not how it works. But you could have easily have gone away and taken a different feeling of this movie than I have. It's very possible. And maybe to a certain point that is true too. But I think overall, we both agree about the same sentiments within this movie, and just yes, it's very poetic, but it's also very heartbreaking when you see certain moments. Like again, that bar scene. I love the fact that the movie started with that bar scene, and how you had a point of view from a different couple looking at these guys talking to each other, with the husband just sitting there looking very like lost and abandoned, while the other two are in deep conversation. And you have an opinion from another party of what's the story behind these people? What do you think they're talking about? What do you think are those two a couple, or is the other two a couple, or are they just friends? And the way that the main actress just looks over and stares into the camera and kind of just like invites you, well, here's the story, bam, and then we just go into it like that. It's just so brilliant how they did it, and then we get to live out the moment in the bar and see exactly what they were talking about and all that. And yeah, it was not only beautiful, but thinking of Homeboy sitting over there being cockholded, it's just like it's like, oh my god.
Conversationally cuckolded. Let's be
conversationally,
clear.
yeah.
He wasn't actually.
Yeah, conversationally.
Watching, okay.
Yeah, but still, I mean, I've been in situations like that, and it's not fun. But again, it's all based on experience, and yeah, it's going to be interesting to see now that you've reevaluated stuff, and now that you've re-included it in on your list. It'll be interesting to see where all that plays out. So
I'm gonna let you introduce the topic. Okay?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, just go for it.
Yeah,
we're segueing, right?
We are segueing. So
go off. Yeah,
we are now in July. And I'm trying to think if we did this last year or not. I think we did, but we didn't really make a big deal out of it. Where it's now is a fun time, and like I mentioned before, everyone seems to be doing it. Everyone who is a movie pundit, critic, they have their podcasts or whatever the case is. But now is that time that we talk about 2023 as a whole, and we've gotten so many movies so far this year. What are the top movies? What are the best movies of the year so far? And of course, these are our own opinions. We're not taking a look at what everyone has put on their list and making an aggregate of like, these are the best films of the year so far. These are our best films of the year so far, our opinions. And of course, Blake and I may have very different lists because of our feelings and thoughts on movies in general, but that's just how it goes. And it leads to like great conversations. And of course, at the end of it all, we would love to hear, you know, what your lists are. How does your list compare to ours? Do you agree with some of our picks and all that stuff? It's the conversation that is really, really great when we do these things. So don't be afraid, don't be shy to mention your thoughts in the comments. If you are listening and viewing this on YouTube, obviously on podcast platforms, you can't really leave comments. You can, but we have no way of interacting with you. But I did bring it up in a previous episode that on Spotify, you could at least leave a voice message for us. So again, I encourage anyone,
hear that.
Please,
tell me I'm wrong about my opinions.
Yeah, please leave a voice message.
Tell me where I'm wrong.
And that would be and we'll feature it on an episode. We will feature it. So don't be shy. Reach out and touch someone.
Might be listening that I'm not sure we should make that open promise. That might get a little rowdy.
Sure.
But if it's a valid voice message, we would love to hear it.
Absolutely.
And if you're a friend, throw in a dig or something. That's fine. But you have to have one valid opinion in there that we can interact with.
Oh man.
No outright trolling.
No, yeah, no. Save that. Save that for our Reddit, our subreddit section, if there is one. I have no idea. But let's kick things off with our number 10s. So the way we're going to do this is that we're going to go 10, 10, 9, 9. We'll go back and forth. We'll just quickly touch base on why it's on our list, and then we'll move on from there. So my number 10. And I doubt this movie is going to be on your list, but I think the reason why it's on my list is because it shocked me how much I really enjoyed this movie. Going into it with very low and minimal expectations, and that is Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves.
Wow.
Yeah,
I haven't even seen it.
Okay, yeah, and I think we even talked about that when the movie came out. You're like, I don't want to see this movie, so we probably won't have an episode that week, and we didn't, because there was like really nothing for us to talk about. But yeah, I went into this knowing Dungeons and Dragons, obviously, because I do play with my friends, but I also played in high school. Knowing the previous outing that they tried to attempt in a movie form with, I believe it was Marlon Wayans. He's the only one I remember. Oh, and the guy who plays Alfred in The Flash. What's his name? He does a lot of like these, like he finds himself in Jeremy Irons.
Jeremy Irons?
Yeah, Jeremy Irons, who acted his ass off in Dungeons and Dragons, that original movie. But the movie was shit. That movie was just terrible. So knowing all that and then going into this with very low expectations and walking away thinking how awesome a movie it was and how funny it was and how enjoyable it was. And so some people I know who decided to go watch it because of what I said about it actually enjoyed it as well. So it was just one of those things that I was very surprised of. So that's why it's on my list. And I know for a fact it was a movie that wasn't going to be on yours. So it's a nice way to start this off for sure.
Yep, good call. I think mine won't be on your list either, the way you talked about it, but my 10 is Sisu, which I don't think I need to say much more than it's got some good Nazi killing. Love that. It's action-packed. It felt like practical effects, and at the very least was like an indie and international film about an old man getting revenge on Nazis, and I love all of those things. So I know it was overly anticipated by a lot of folks, and some people were disappointed. I think you're among them. I very much enjoyed the movie for those aspects of it, and wish there were more movies like it. So that's why Sisu made my 10 spot.
Good choice. I love that. Huge surprise. Sisu is my number 9. So
okay.
Yeah. Even though I was a little disappointed because I do feel like the trailers showed too much. And I didn't like the way that they were promoting it, saying that it's the John Wick, but of
World War II.
World War II in
Yeah.
Finland and all that. I didn't see it that way, but when I analyzed it and I realized, no, this is more like a Rambo. This is more like kind of like a throwback to like those old school action movies that I grew up watching. The minute I started thinking of it that way, I was like, oh, this was actually a very well done movie. And you're right, it did feel very raw, very practical, which is not something we get anymore these days. And it was simple. When you really think about it, very simple movie, and it played out that way, and I enjoyed it for that. So that is why for me personally, it's my number 9. So there you go, big surprise.
Okay, good call. My 9. Now I'm just gonna keep saying this until it's not true, or until it's true. I don't think mine is on yours. Inside, the Willem Dafoe movie. Is that
Oh
on your
no,
list?
no, it's not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Basically, I love a good art heist movie. I like movies about art. This one isn't fully about art, but it is a very artful piece of cinema. And it's technically about an art heist, but then you add Willem Dafoe in a 127 hours style survivalist movie. But instead of being stuck in between two rocks, he's stuck in the wealthiest apartment, nicest apartment you've ever seen, and is trying to figure out how to stay alive when he literally is locked inside of essentially a vault of a very fancy apartment. Love a good acting. It's basically a one-man show. I love a good acting tour de force, and seeing Willem Dafoe try to steal art, then be stuck in an apartment and just be pushed to his absolute limits was, I found, a very enjoyable and miserable, but enjoyably miserable experience.
Now it's interesting because this was a movie that I was very curious about, but I knew nothing about it. The way you describe it, it sounds like very like Ryan Reynolds, Tom Hardy one man movie where it's all centrally this them with dialogue and conversation. Is that safe to say? Like that's pretty much what you get here?
No real conversation happening. There's a little bit of someone in an earpiece early on,
Okay.
and there is the threat of other people, like either police or the apartment's owner.
Mm-hmm.
There is another character who isn't there. It's the person who owns the apartment. He's learning about them, kind of.
Okay.
But for the most part, it is pretty. I don't know how much dialogue there is in the movie. At some points, he'll go Tom Hanks Castaway and like talk to himself a little bit, kind of thing, and
Interesting.
like while he's losing his mind. But even then, there might not be much of that. It's mainly just a guy by himself for an hour, whatever, hour and a half, I think. I don't think it was too long.
Mm-hmm.
And it also, in light of like COVID and people being isolated, there was something to that too, where
Oh wow.
watching someone be pushed to their limits without any social interaction was made it another level of challenge that the movie took on, and I think succeeded with.
Gotcha. Okay. I honestly, you piqued my interest even more so. So now I feel like I really definitely need to watch this movie before the year ends because, like, when we do our year end recap, who knows? This could be a movie that might be on that list because that sounds fascinating to me.
I have a
Um,
feeling some of the Oscar movies in December and some Oppenheimer type stuff might push this one down, maybe some Barbie.
of course,
The
yeah,
these but the once we get to the top few, I feel like some of them are solidly gonna be there.
yeah.
Inside, though, it is one of those, especially if I rewatch it and revisit it, it has a special place in my heart, and
Hmm.
especially since, like, I saw it essentially by myself in a theater, which made it a doubly interesting experience of just being alone in a giant
You
room.
two were
Yeah.
isolated in a glass
Yeah.
box of emotion while watching it.
But I think more people should have seen this one. I think a lot of people will enjoy it, especially I think a lot of people are gonna think of it as like a streamer. You
Mm,
don't need to watch it in a theater necessarily.
yeah.
I'm assuming there'll be a moment where it gets more traction, or at least especially if it is in any award convo, maybe not. We do know that the Oscars love going out of their way to nominate Willem Dafoe. If you see something like that, a lot of people are gonna watch it, and that'll be interesting to see. But it has a special place in my little indie movie love and heart.
Awesome. Okay. No, that's good to know. And again, thank you for talking about it because now I am very curious. Um Moving on to number 8. Number 8, I again, it's funny that I put it here because it does kind of relate to my number 9, and that's John Wick 4. So John Wick 4 was definitely one of those uh I was expecting to like this movie, and I liked it, and liked it even more so than I was expecting. It was just one of those action tour de force type of movies that I was just very, very thrilled and excited to see. And I loved when we talked about it too, where it was just like it's some of the best shot action sequences that we've seen. And even to this day, I'll never forget the top down view of him going ham with the shotgun going room to room and all that, and
Yeah.
how it even plays like a damn video game. And I was just like, this is fucking fantastic. And then that crazy ass stair sequence that
Staircase.
just
Yeah.
never ended. It was just like I shouldn't be liking it as much as I should, and it is just fantastic. So, yeah, I had to put that on my list as one of the best of the year for me so far.
I'm not going to say anything because all I'll say is I'm shocked by how low it is on your list because we'll get to it later for me, and
Sure.
I'll save my comments until then. So I don't know if you want to jump up to your 7th spot, or do a flipperoo. It's up to you.
What was your number
Wait, I'm
8?
sorry. Actually, you're right. Mine is later. I'll get to it later, and then we can. Yeah. Okay. My number 8, which we just talked about a bunch, is Past Lives.
Okay.
Beautiful, poignant, softer than I realized it would be. I was expecting, for what it's worth, I went into it expecting to just weep the entire time. The way people talked about how devastating it is, it's quietly devastating, which that's part of what made it age better for me. Some movies, it's very in your face how sad and tragic it is, and this one has that to a degree, but there's something deeper happening under the surface for this one, and it's more of a slow burn. So I would recommend it to people, even if they're afraid of, I'm going to go and it's going to be a tearjerker so hard. It has that, but it's much quieter and softer and simpler than that at the same time. It's not hitting you over the head with it,
Right.
with the tragedy.
Yeah. If anything, it does a really great job at allowing you to really invest in these characters, and really trying to understand more so where they're coming from than the bond themselves that they had themselves. Because when they finally do address it, then it's very believable. And you're like, okay, I can kind of understand why this is happening the way it's happening. So yeah, no, I'm glad you have it back on your list. So it's great that you were able to address it that way.
I'm glad we talked about it. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's one of the nice things about what we do here is getting to look at things that we'd enjoyed before, but in a new light.
No, absolutely. Moving on to number 7. This is again in a year where we've seen tons of disappointment when it comes to superhero movies, comic book movies. And not just only this year, but in years past. I feel like the genre in general has been suffering. A movie comes out that the expectations were high, and I felt like it definitely met and exceeded it. And that was Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. It was like the perfect closeout to the James Gunn Marvel series that he helped start. And it was emotional, very well directed, well written. The characters that we pretty much saw grow up in front of our eyes, and how we've loved them ever since they were introduced to us, how their arcs together kind of came to the conclusion. I thought it was just beautifully done and very enjoyable. Great villain, which we don't get to see a lot these days. And just overall, like a fantastic movie and like a very entertaining thing to watch in theaters. I mentioned it to you that I rewatched it again in theaters recently, and it still had that same impact after a second viewing, after so many weeks later. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed this movie. So it's definitely one of my favorites of the year so far.
I love that for you. I'm not surprised it's on your list. I did not put it on mine. There's a version where I relitigate my list and it is on there.
Sure.
I remember really enjoying it. It's just not the kind of movie that I'm gonna give more shine to on a top 10 list. That said, we have a whole episode with our thoughts about it. So if anyone's curious, like, what does Blake really think about the animal torture? We can get into that in the episode. But it was a successful Guardians movie for sure.
Yeah.
I don't want to take anything away from it. I enjoyed it. We're on number 7 now, Blackberry. Which, have you seen it yet?
Oh man, I've been dying to see this movie. It's just I can't.
I feel like it's a Renee movie. Yeah.
It just when it was out in so few theaters here in New York,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
theaters that not anywhere close to me. And it hasn't hit streaming yet. Like, which is like, what the hell? What's the deal?
It's at IFC Center still for anyone who's curious, but it did not get as much play as I thought it would.
Yeah.
I actually thought it was going to be more of a big, wide release. People really excited about it. Saw it with a couple buddies. It was a perfect like bros night movie. It is a very broy film. It's set in the tech industry of before the iPhone, so that's part of the reason.
Hmm.
There's a couple female characters, but even off memory, like I'm not. It is not going to pass a Bechdel test by any stretch of
Hmm.
the imagination. Nonetheless, it's essentially like an indie social network, which The Social Network to me is one of the best movies of all
Yeah.
time. Like in the
Yeah.
last 20 years, my
Hmm.
goodness. So it's a Canadian version. It's more indie. It's a little bit quieter, but overall, it's just as gripping and just as enthralling of a story, and in some ways more so, because we know the fate of BlackBerry, and it gets to play
Yeah.
with that in retrospect. And you get to watch the come, and it's more of like the biopic where Social Network, we know that the dude ends up very, very successful. This one, we know it's kind of the opposite.
Yeah.
That made for an interesting version of the drama where, a Shakespearean style, before the movie even starts, you know how this thing is going to fucking end. And you get to watch kind of like maybe similar to like Wolf of Wall Street energy there. So it ends more on a downbeat, which is my problem with a lot of those biopics. Nonetheless, great acting, better than I thought. Glenn Howerton of It's Always Sunny fame did a great job playing the villainous businessman. And Jay Baruchel being on the front of a movie poster, getting his moment to play a very famous person, he absolutely crushed it. He's more famous for being like a Seth Rogen friend in some of
Yep.
those comedies, but we know he can act. He acted his ass off in this one and carried the movie really well. And there's a lovely supporting cast of his buddies and misfits and geeks and weirdos. There's a couple things in the movie where it's a very Renee movie. They do movie night, and there's a dude who's obsessed with like Goonies and Indiana Jones. I'm not kidding. Actually, now that I think about it, there's a Renee character in the fucking movie who
Yes.
happens to be like, a tech nerd, and the way his character, the fate of his character, I won't say. I'll let
Okay.
you discover that for yourself. But very enjoyable watch and very, very gripping, high quality drama,
Yeah.
but also not like as high stakes as Wolf of Wall Street or Social Network, which made it funner in a certain way.
Yeah. Again, this when I heard about this movie coming out, it definitely was a movie that I wanted to see, but it's just circumstantial. I just have not been able to see it, And I have seen this movie pop up on some people's top 10 lists of the year so far, and it kills me because again, this is one of the things I don't understand sometimes when it comes to streaming, because even to this day, I can't see After Sun yet. It's not available on any streaming service. I don't even think it's available on video on demand, or if it is, it's like at a very expensive price still. And I just don't understand, like, what is the reasoning behind this? Are they really still trying to make bank at the box office? I mean, at this point, if you have one theater in a major metropolitan city showing it, I don't see how much money they're making really off of it. Wouldn't you rather get more eyes invested in watching it? Like it's just one of those things I really don't understand. But the minute I have a moment, an opportunity to go see it, I'm definitely going to check it out because, I'm very interested in it. And the fact knowing that there is a me character in there, hell yeah, I definitely want to
Yeah.
check that out.
For the record, it's available to stream,
It is?
but it's available to rent.
Ah,
It might only be purchase. I can pull that up, but it is definitely available online for sure. I think a Canadian production, and I think it's one of those like a lot of European movies you'll see like funded by the Canadian government, whatever.
sure.
There might be some weird licensing rule there about
Mm,
where it's allowed to go and where it's not, because it's not the typical, oh, it's DC, so it's going to go to HBO type of deal.
right, right.
Um, but regardless, if it is purchase only, it'll be worth keep an eye out for it, because
Yeah.
once you can see
Okay.
it reasonably, whatever the budget or free streaming wherever, it's a worthwhile watch. Absolutely. And I think it's another one of those, you don't have to see it in theaters. It might
Yeah.
have, if this was like a pandemic year, it's the kind of thing a lot of people would see and really enjoy and be
Right.
surprised by.
Okay, I'll keep an eye out. Or maybe it's one of those things where I wonder if it's streaming on like Canadian Netflix. You know,
Yeah, I don't know how that works.
because that would be fascinating to find out. Because there is a way to kind of VPN into Canada and kind of open Netflix, and then ooh, look, we have BlackBerry. I don't know. It's something to investigate later on for sure. But that's awesome. I love the fact that it's on your list there. Cool. Moving on to number 6, a movie we briefly talked about earlier in this episode. My number 6 is Asteroid City. Wes Anderson's Asteroid City. I really, really enjoyed this movie. I thought it was definitely well done. It is definitely a Wes Anderson movie. That is probably the if people were to in 10 years from now go back in time and maybe think of what are some of the defining films of Wes Anderson, I have a feeling this is going to be one of them because it is definitely a very Wes Anderson type of film. But I just love how the ensemble cast, how well the chemistry was there, how well the acting was, the cinematography, all that good stuff. It was just definitely for me. It is not getting great reviews from other people who are big Wes Anderson fans. I think a lot of people didn't appreciate it as much as we did. But that being said, I loved it, and so that's why it's definitely number 6 on my list.
Speaking of it not getting much love from fans, it's not on my top 10. And this is the one
see, that's
where
interesting.
I moved it off for past lives when I kind of rethought through it. I am also having like a little bit of an existential crisis about this movie, the way that Wes Anderson was when making it. At the end of the day, if I'm being fully honest, it's probably in my top 10 list. There's a couple of these that might not be, but at the end of the day, the ones where I'm pleasantly surprised by them are going to get more love for me on a list like this rather than the one where, oh yeah, I thought it would be great and it was pretty great. And I rewatched it as part of the problem, and I hoped I would love it a lot more. And I'm not trying to say anything negative about the movie. It is a very successful Wes Anderson movie. It was very good. I loved it. I rewatched it and I didn't love it more, and I thought I would. I thought I would be really deeply like, oh, I get it now, and it would have more burn on the second watch. It was kind of the opposite, where I was even more bored. Whereas the first time I saw it with a friend, and they were like, why was it slow here? What was it even trying to say? It was kind of a waste of time. And I was making a whole case against that. The second viewing, it wasn't more impactful, even though I kind of felt like I knew what's he going for and what's the meaning of it. I could rewatch it with all that in mind. It felt almost more aimless, at least compared to the first. I was really into it and like parsing questions about the meaning of art and this director, great director, looking back on their career. So I'm only talking about it so much because I think it's for me at least, it's a substantial. It's substantial that it's missing from this list. I think that says more about it that I've lost some love for the movie.
Gotcha. So, okay, well that makes sense. So what did make your list and number 6?
Rye Lane.
Rye Lane. No, I am not. You know? Please.
RYE Lane, like the name of a street.
Yeah.
Hulu movie.
Okay.
I don't think it's elsewhere. Maybe they put it out for purchase elsewhere, but I think it's a Hulu movie. It's an all-black cast set in South London. It's a rom-com, which is rare these days, and I love a good rom-com. Part of what was nice about it, which was talking to a friend about it, it was nice that it was an all-black cast without having to be like a black issues movie. It's one of those that they could have changed a couple lines of dialogue and it could have been an all-white cast. And yet the 2 stars, very charismatic, one who I know from Industry on HBO and really enjoyed his character that didn't have enough screen time, in my opinion. And the female lead was it had similar effect to like watching Keke Palmer in Nope, where I was going like, holy shit, the amount of charisma coming off the screen right now absolutely blew me away. Their chemistry was solid as hell. And even by calling it a rom-com, I'm kind of saying too much. We don't really know the fate. Essentially, it's just a boy and a girl meet and they have 24 hours of adventure together. And it was lovely. And I laughed a lot and I wept my ass off at some point. And it kind of hit me at the right time. But I also think there's something about how rare this movie is, where regardless of even just the casting and representation there, just having a good rom-com these days is way too rare. It's a genre that's all but fallen off.
Yeah.
I'm really glad that this one was made. It's one of the most pleasant home viewing experiences that I've had of the year so far. So full send recommend, especially on a date night. There's something really nice about this one where it's not even the oh my god true love destiny. It's not tragic. It's not these big stakes. It's more of like a boy and a girl getting to know each other better and asking themselves questions about their exes and having to deal with that. And that made it for a particularly what I would imagine to be a really particularly good date night movie. So if you are looking to stream this one, anybody, that's how I would kind of recommend doing it, or even on your own. It's also absolutely a nice watch.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I am not aware of this movie at all. So very, very interesting. And I just looked it up, and yeah, it looks interesting there. So okay, great recommendation. I'll definitely add that to my queue of movies to catch up on for this year.
If I may, I'm just gonna add like one other thing, which I want to make sure to mention with this movie,
Yeah.
especially since people aren't really talking about it. The directing and the art directing and the visuals of it. Some people are comparing it to Wes Anderson, which in tone it's not really. It's much more like it's a louder. It's the script is more in your face. It's funnier and more overtly funny and
Hmm.
silly and lighthearted than Wes Anderson is able or willing to be. But it was a very like twee indie style and kind of like Edgar Wright-y at parts, where is a very stylized movie. I think that was another thing that I really enjoyed was just watching it. Like the visuals on the screen were a very pleasant experience. And then I already mentioned right the cast and the writing and the plot overall.
Yeah.
So very fun experience, basically in every way you judge a movie, which is why it has so much love for me.
Okay. Hey, definitely worth checking out then for sure, especially if rom-com is your jam because I will say rom-coms are not my jam. So it definitely takes a lot for me to go watch a particular rom-com. But like you said, rom-coms as far as box office, not great these days anymore.
Not
It
these days. No.
kind of extinct. And it goes along with the conversation when we talk about R-rated comedies, kind of like the same genre. But these things do really, really extremely well on streaming. So
I
it's
would
nice to see that.
This is a little bit it's not necessarily meta, but it does transcend the genre too, because it's
Hmm.
not even there's a really cute chemistry and dynamic between the main two leads. It's actually mainly dealing with their exes and their
Oh,
heartbreak and their past, and that's how they meet, is they're randomly run into each other and they start talking about that and they bond over that. And then
hmm,
they have to run into and have like there's a little revenge plot line where they're on these little madcap adventures trying to get the record back from the ex's apartment.
right.
Where there's a moment where they one of them gets his come up on the ex who really did him wrong, and it is one of my favorite scenes is at a restaurant and she goes with him and acts like his new girlfriend, and it is one of the most satisfying things after you hear how wrong that ex did him. So overall, even it's not even necessarily rom-com. It's definitely more than that too. So
Hmm.
genuinely, if you're by yourself looking for just a comedy, that it's going to have some romance and emotionalism in it, but overall it was just like it was more than just that. At the same time, it was
Got it.
definitely not a rom-com for rom-com sake movie.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Um, moving on to our number five. So now we've already gone through our bottom half of the list. Now we're going to be hitting our top five of the year so far. So my number five, Beau is Afraid. This is again Ari Aster. This was Blake's entry into the Ari Aster world, and it's nice to hear. Prior to us recording this, he mentioned that he finally watched Midsommar, which I love to hear. I'll leave it up to you to talk about a little bit of that if you'd like. But Beau is Afraid was just one of those movies that it 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 was so bizarre and so complex in an Ari Aster fashion that it was just so fantastic to watch. And seeing it a second time really helped explain the movie a lot. And you pick up on a lot of things you may have missed in your first watching. And then, after having our discussion about it with our theories and our kind of speculation as, oh, we think this may be the case for this or this may be the case for that, watching it the second time around with that mindset you're like, oh, I think we're right about this, or wait, maybe we're kind of close on this, but we're not. Like, I think it may be veering more into this territory or whatever. And just having that type of experience watching a movie like that is just so fantastic. And yeah, the acting, the directing, the editing, the everything involved in this movie was just so well done and so enjoyable. If this is your thing, this is definitely not a movie for everybody. But if this is your thing, then this was like a perfect movie for you. And I could not have it. I could not have it on my list. Like, this was definitely one of the best movies of the year so far for me. May not be top, but it's definitely a top 5 for me of the year so far.
So I'm going to save my thoughts for a little bit later in my list. That said, it's nice hearing you talk about it on the rewatch. I saw it a second time.
Yeah.
Watched Midsommar recently because of how much I enjoyed this movie.
Mm-hmm.
It made me enjoy this movie even more because I didn't love Midsommar the way I did this one. But I recently walked by a movie theater where it was playing at an indie cinema, and a couple hipsters, and watching them walk out of the theater, and I just happened to be standing outside the theater, not even going to the movies, just standing there. I was like, "What are they talking about?" And I just eavesdropped the fuck out of their conversation.
Nice.
And hearing them try to parse through the movie after their minds had just been blown for 3 hours was so delightful.
Oh,
I was like,
yeah.
I'm glad I don't have to ask myself the question of what was that in the attic anymore.
Right.
And instead we get to talk about it in retrospect. And so I'll get to mine in a little bit.
Awesome.
Yeah. My next one is everybody Little Mermaid.
Oh, wow.
We went into it. We have an episode about it.
Yeah.
We went into it. We loved the hell out of this movie and talked about it. So if you want full thoughts, go to that episode. All I'll say is, like, I had decent expectations for it. This was one of my favorite movies when I was young, one of my first favorite movies, one of my first crushes. This movie is better than the original. I've now rewatched it, and I can say very strongly the music is better. The way they made a couple changes to the plot. The joke I make is that it's more dimensional, which obviously it is. It's the real, the real life version of it. But I was just as impressed, and more so on the second viewing, of just what a quality work this is.
Mm-hmm.
Compared to, like, what did we want to say? Like, compared to Asteroid City, is it a great work of art that's going to live forever? Like, I'm not asking myself that question. It's kind of like, for what it's trying to do and what it is very fucking successful. And if you only want to watch, like, movies that challenge your sensibilities and make you kind of nauseous, or like, what's the meaning of life? This movie does have, like, deep meanings in it, and questions in it. But at the end of the day, it's a Disney movie, and they crushed it. And the fact that they did an even better job this go round, when all of the other recent live action remakes have been pretty unsuccessful around the board, with rare exception, made me love it even more. So that's why it's my top 5 movie of the year so far.
I'm surprised. I was not expecting you to.
It's not on your list at all.
No, it's not.
I thought we would get to it late. Damn. Okay.
No, it's not. I mean, don't get me wrong. I enjoyed the movie. The movie was great. I agree with you that it is definitely better than the original. Just because of the fact that it dives deeper into some of the characters. We already spoke that it had legs and all that. But yeah, it made me more invested in the characters, and seeing them play out the way that they portrayed them this time around. And it made, in my opinion, I think some people out there don't agree, but it made the chemistry more understandable between the two. But I feel like there are some people who don't feel that way at all.
Some people like cartoons, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not trying to disparage anyone who likes cartoons and feels more romance towards them. That's not weird. That's fine. I, however, felt like this relationship dynamic between two living, breathing people was a little more believable, we'll say.
Yeah, there you go.
And they pulled it off too. Yeah,
they did. Okay, no, that was great surprise to hear. I love that. That's awesome. Moving on to number 4. Speaking of animated, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse is my number 4, because again, I mentioned earlier, when it comes to the comic book superhero genre, we haven't been getting a lot of great hits. It's been a lot of meh or oof kind of reactions from a lot of these things. But when it comes to Across the Spider-Verse, the first one was already fantastic. And I think a lot of us were wondering, well, how are they ever going to top that? And they topped it and then some in this one. I mean, oh my gosh, talk about a work of art just watching all throughout. I mean, animation style was amazing. They stepped it up several notches here. The voice acting was just really great across the board. The character development, everything was just so enjoyable and so well done. And this really felt like a true cinematic comic book superhero type of movie, and it was just enjoyable. And I really can't wait for the third one to come out whenever that is. Now, granted, now after the fact, there is some controversy because of the amount of work and pressure the animators have gone through. A lot of them have spoken out about the deadlines and being overworked and all that, which I don't necessarily disagree with. But I also agree with what when you look at it in regards of the producers and the directors, where it's like, if it wasn't for that type of pressure, we would not have gotten this type of cinematic masterpiece that we got. That being said, there definitely needs to be implementations of regulations as to how much demand to put on such animators or whatever the case is.
Spend more money or spend more time and
Right,
don't drive your creators into the ground, or else you might not get another movie like this on
right,
the third one instead of just taking the short bet. That's the counterpoint, in my opinion. But I'm
right.
also, yeah.
No, I think at the end of the day, I think unionize. I think the best way is just have all the animators unionize, and that way they can make sure that regulations like that can really be implemented and enforced. It does work for like actors and the writers, even though they are currently, well, the writers are on strike. The actors looks like they're about to be on strike. So we're not going to have any Hollywood right now, like probably in the next couple of weeks. But I do feel like things like that do help when it comes to situations like this. But at the end of the day, they put out an amazing piece of work, and I really do hope it continues with the third one. But it was such an enjoyable movie going experience when I saw this, so that's why it's number 4 on my list of the year.
Good call. It's not on my list. I respected the hell out of the movie. It's not to take anything away from it. It's not really my genre as much,
Sure.
but awesome movie. Great choice. My fourth spot is going to go to Sanctuary, another
Ah,
indie movie. Acting powerhouse, two people stuck in a room instead of Willem Dafoe by himself. Instead, we have Christopher Abbott, one of my favorite actors, and Margaret Qualley, absolutely crushing it on screen. It's essentially like a sex drama in a hotel room, an acting showcase. It's dealing with wealth and power dynamics, sex work, role play, and at the end of the day, it's mainly like just a deep psychological probe on these two people, but especially the male lead, who is a wealthy heir to a hotel fortune. And where it goes, it was very surprising, especially considering that they're in the one hotel room the whole time. It was very cinematic. And even I got to go to a Q&A, which helped add some of my excitement for the movie. But hearing them talk about it, Jack Antonoff led the Q&A, which even more excitement on my end. But hearing the director talk about what it was like trying to make that hotel room, it's essentially you don't feel stuck in it. It's a really nice hotel room. The way they move the camera around, things like that. It wasn't as claustrophobic to where even at the end of the movie, I go, wait, they didn't really go outside. I think there might be a scene. But for the most part, it's just two people in each other's heads. And I really, really, I enjoyed it. And with that minimal plot line, essentially they did a lot with it, and it was very successful at doing a small task but going super deep with it. So
mm-hmm.
that's my number 4 movie of the year so far.
Nice. And you definitely spoke about this movie before in a previous episode. One question I do have for you, and maybe for those who don't know the movie at all, how does this movie, because just based off hearing you describe it, how does it compare to a movie like what is it? 50 Shades of Grey, or something like that series You that
Okay,
I've
haven't seen You.
okay,
I have seen 50 Shades. I think I've seen all of them.
okay,
Um, it is very different than that. One, the quality of cinema is much higher,
okay,
but also it's not trying to do nearly as much. It's essentially just getting into psychological mind fucking, power dynamics. A character you think they're one person, but that turns out they were role playing during that, and
hmm
the other character is getting mind fucked, and at some point they're like there's safe words, and there's times where like you're not sure if that's the actual safe word or a fake safe word kind of thing, and you're not sure if this person's actually afraid or if they're playing into that weird dynamic. And kind of what it's getting into is in the bedroom people are playing out things that they can't play out in real life, and essentially like this is the safe space, more or less, depending on like what you're into and how okay you are with those lines being pushed. But the safe space where he's getting to work out all of his issues and she's
hmm
working out some of hers, and but mainly playing with him. She's mainly the manipulator. But then at the end of the day, he still has the power, and it gets kind of tense near the end. At the end of the day, too, I think someone might be worried seeing the trailer or the description. It's not as overtly sexual as you might think. There's a couple moments where it is, where she's like licking her palm kind of thing, and then
yeah,
obviously what happens after that. But other than like a couple small moments, it's not like a fuck city movie. It's not like full nudity and just like people going at it. It is all essentially about the foreplay, and the foreplay in this case being the role play of getting inside of each other's heads and then like moving things around. And that was, I think, part of what made it such a cool. Essentially, it could be a play right now and a very beloved off Broadway type play, like a critically acclaimed. And instead, they just made a movie instead. And I yeah. Um, but it's more than those movies are, while being a lot less at the same time, doing more with less.
gotcha. Okay, good to know. So that is your number four, and now we are approaching our number three, our top three. So for me, number three, I'm sticking to the animation genre, and I know this is a movie I know for a fact you didn't see, and that is Suzume. Suzume is an anime movie that came out earlier this year. It's from a director that I really enjoyed. I really enjoy when he came out with an anime movie called No Name. I believe it's called No Name or something like that. The reason why this movie ranks so high for me is when you talk about the animation genre and how animation could be truly cinematic. We just talked about Across the Spider-Verse and how cinematic that was. This is a great definition of how cinematic animation can be. The art style, the directing, the choice of angles used in the animation, the voice acting, the story, just so well done. And it's not really something that was so overly fantastical. Of course, you're going to get fantastical elements. It is an anime, but it is very, in its own way, grounded. And I just really enjoyed the fuck out of this movie. And it's just brilliant, brilliant cinema, in my opinion. And it's one of those things that it should have gotten more attention than it did, because this can easily go toe to toe with your Pixar's, with your Disney, with Across the Spider Verse, if it had more support, more marketing, more theater acceptance, because it wasn't showing in a lot of theaters here in New York. I believe it was set at one point to show at a very for a limited time, but because of its success, a lot of these theaters expanded its run because of that. And even in Japan, it did really well, but not as well as it should have. And I feel like if you are a huge animation fan, if you love animation movies, then this is a must see for you. Just because it's just brilliant overall, and the story itself was also very heartwarming and touching at the same time. So I implore people to give this movie a shot if they have the opportunity to watch it, especially if this is their jam. So yeah, for me, this was number three for me of the year.
Now I want to watch it. The other movie you were saying, it's Your Name,
Your Name.
and
That's it. Yeah.
apparently the reviews for this movie are great. And apparently, Your Name, fifth highest grossing film of all
Yep.
time in Japan, and the highest grossing anime film, overtaking Spirited Away, which is
Yep.
saying a hell of a lot.
Yep.
So that's for that movie. For this one, the reviews are incredible,
Mm-hmm.
and thank you. This is why I'm glad we're friends. You get to let me in on something that I might not have been aware of.
Oh yeah, back and forth. I
Um,
mean, you told me about stuff that I haven't seen yet, and there you go. And I know animation's not your thing, but you do give it a shot from time to time if it's something that sounds compelling. So I would ask you to give it a shot if you can.
okay.
But I know
By the end
also
of the year, I'm gonna have to fix this for this end of the year list so that I can
right.
at least
Oh,
keep up. Yeah.
and that's a good point too. Like I wonder if a movie like this would be qualified for Oscar contention, because I do think it has every right to be because of how well of a movie it is. So,
Um, I'm excited to check it out. My 3 movie is How to Blow Up a Pipeline. Speaking of
oh,
us taking turns
nice.
on ones we haven't seen,
There you go. Yeah,
um, I the politics of it are fascinating. I enjoyed the politics of it. A lot of people find them very controversial. At
sure.
some point, there was a podcast talking to the filmmaker. They're like, "So this is such a revolutionary film, and you're talking about advocating for violence." And the person essentially just kind of like laughed, like it was such like a non uh, consequential. And the interviewer said they felt very old. It's like this is a young person who's like talking about environmentalism and the planet is dying, and the politics I enjoy. The actual filmmaking was great. The tension and the way they built that up. Essentially, you're watching, and there's moments where you're literally watching like what would be like a fuse on a bomb,
Mm-hmm.
and the movie felt like that. I don't know
Mm,
how else to explain it other than like the tension in the room, in the theater, inside of me was just like, wait, there's no way this is about to happen, kind
right.
of thing. And I won't say more to it because the movie needs to be watched with the ending in mind. Just like you don't light a fuse without seeing if the bomb's going to go off and what effect that might have. But overall, beginning to end, I felt like this was a very successful movie tackling a giant issue and something that is tackled in ways like documentaries and sometimes like in looser ways of, oh, it's the Transformers movie, but it has an environmental subplot. In this one, it's a fucking movie about militant environmental activism, how this group
Yeah.
of strangers got together, how they met online, and then what their plan is. And I found it to be compelling as hell. So full send recommend for anyone who's interested in a movie that has a good a bit, even if regardless of the politics, just the if you weren't even concerned about the environment or you didn't even know if this was a real issue or not,
Mm-hmm.
the tension and the suspense of this like thriller of are these people going to pull off the mission, kind of like a heist essentially.
Okay.
But the point is to like blow up a pipeline basically.
Right.
Very very compelling. So fully recommend.
All right. Yeah. I mean, it still remains on my list of movies to check out from this year for sure. Especially after hearing you talk about it the first time you mentioned it. So yeah, great to know how highly regarded it is for you for the year. So good stuff. All right, number two. I'm curious how you're gonna feel about this one.
I want to be clear here. There's 2 movies I mentioned that I haven't gotten to yet.
Yeah.
You've already talked about. So I don't know how you want to do it, but just FYI, you might want to switch our turns so that you're ending with one. If it's more surprising or one we haven't talked about, I don't know if it's the same here where we've already mentioned your 1 and 2 or something. But just FYI,
It's
we've already kind of touched on
yeah.
mine.
No, it's fine. I mean, we'll just continue the way we're doing it,
Okay,
and we'll
perfect.
see how it plays out. But I have a feeling this one's definitely going to surprise you. Air. Air is my number two.
I still need to see it. Oh no. Oh
Oh,
no,
see, okay,
I haven't seen it yet. I have to. Now I have to. I didn't realize you
yeah.
loved it that much.
Oh, dude,
Wow.
this is that feel good type of movie that we get at least one of these a year. And this is definitely one that we got much earlier in the year that really hit home. It was again, you have Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, back together again, and a great ensemble cast on top of that, talking about the basically the reinvention of Nike and the explosion of the Jordan brand. It, it's a sports movie, but not really, because we're talking about a product and not really the athlete.
It's like a
And
business movie, kind of
yeah, it's like a business
closer
type
to
of,
Blackberry.
could, yeah, maybe. Again, I haven't seen that, but based on what you describe, could be, yeah. And it's interesting the way they tackle the athlete involved in it, because you don't see him, which is interesting. And I'm not spoiling anything here for you because I know you haven't seen it yet, but it's really more about the legacy of the brand, the name, and all that. And just seeing this ragtag group of employees trying to reinvigorate themselves, reinvigorate the company. I mean, the history by now, their competition with Adidas and Converse and all that, and trying to be the top dog or what have you. It was just such a fun ride watching it all the way through. So this was, again, one of those great feel good type of movies that, again, we don't get a lot of, but when we do get it, it's much appreciated. But when we get one that's done this well, even more so. So I highly, highly recommend that you watch this movie.
I'm fascinated that it made it that high on your list, but
Yeah.
okay. Now I really got to check it out. So,
Yeah.
My number 2, we've talked about John Wick 4. Absolutely love this movie. It might be my favorite one. Someone recently described it as the of the John Wick movies, the musical, where there's just like these giant set piece and so much dancing and choreography,
Right.
like as to its own end, and it's violent, but it's more so like there's times where you're not even really seeing the violence. It's just like the fantastic spectacle of the movie is on 10. And some other times it's like 9.5, which is funny because like the other ones are also very much that way. This one's even more so. I enjoyed the hell out of it. Saw it a couple times in theaters, edge of my seat, and even the second viewing I appreciated more because it wasn't moving as fast. Right, you get to slow down
Right.
and appreciate some of the set design and how they set it up, and going like, but still, there's no way. Like seeing a magician do the same trick twice and not knowing how they did it, or being equally impressed, it makes it even more impressive of a feat. So we don't need to talk about it. I bet everyone in the world is aware of this movie. You either saw it and loved it or you didn't see it.
Right.
I absolutely saw it and loved it. So that's my number 2 movie of the year.
That's amazing. Because again, knowing you, and for those of you listening to us and watching us, you get to know us more and more each time. I was not expecting a full-blown action movie to be on the very top of your
You're the
list.
Blockbuster guy. I do like a good action movie, but it's not really. I mean, you might expect a little The Sanctuary, and
Right.
the Blackberry, and the Rye
Right.
Lane, and the Past Lives,
Yeah.
and the Inside, and John
Yeah.
Wick 4 was amazing. Absolutely amazing.
It's fantastic. It's funny. It is kind of like a reversal of roles for this episode, because my number 1 movie of the year so far is Past Lives, and that's where that movie sits for me. Okay. And again, I talked about it before. It's a movie that stuck in my head for a very long time after I watched it, and because of that, I had to change my rating of it on Letterboxd. It is in my heart, I am a romantic, so movies like this do hit me. When you compare it to movies like Eternal Sunshine of a Spotless Mind, Lost in Translation, kind of like those gut-wrenching romance movies, but romance when it comes to unrealized romance or romance that gets away from you, things that don't work out, what ifs scenarios when it involves romance, like those are the movies that hit me the hardest. And again, it has a lot to do with experiences, and I've been through a lot of experiences like that, and this is one of those movies that we haven't gotten a movie like this in a while, and now that we have, it hit me very hard, and I didn't realize it until after the fact. Because like I said, I'll just be doing random stuff, and then that final scene will pop into my head for some reason. Or I'll see something that reminds me of that final scene. And I'm just like, man, that movie has like one of those like long-lasting impacts in my mind. So at the end of the year, will it still be this high up? I don't know. But something tells me it will probably still be in my top 10. based off of what I know that's still coming out for the rest of the year and what have you. But who knows? But as of right now, as of the halfway mark of 2023, this is my top movie of the year so far.
Wow. High
Yeah.
praise. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, I my number one is Beau is Afraid, and
And I'm not surprised
uh,
by that.
yeah, you know me too well. I love a good Joaquin Phoenix movie. I love a good acting showcase. It's some of my favorite movies are the ones where they get nominated and win best actor or actress just for like going absolutely ham on one role. I really enjoyed seeing that. It was my first Ari Aster film. I was skeptical and worried that I would be too freaked out by it, and instead it was just the right amount.
Yeah.
And instead of being like the horror murder movie, it's essentially the anxiety movie, which
Yep.
spoke to me. And I felt like, okay, this director gets it in a way that I'd even had like the idea of a movie like this where someone's mental state is showing things that aren't real, but making it seem like they are.
Yeah.
And there's movies where they'll do that in like a horror or they're on drugs or something, they're seeing it. But this one was so intense and it put those feelings inside of you. I love a movie that'll just kind of like put its fingers around my spine and just like twist a little bit.
Uh-huh.
And afterward, I couldn't stop talking about it. We analyzed the hell out of it. Every friend I talked to who'd seen it were going, okay, let's get into this. Like, let's talk through it. Saw it a couple times in theaters, loved it just as much the second time. I can't say enough about how good this movie is, but like when it's not enjoyable at all, but it's that fucking good. And of course I enjoyed it. I laughed at parts and like got into emotional at certain parts. Like it was a good experience, but none of it was like the main character wasn't having fun for half of
Oh no.
at any point. There was brief moments of relief that were then immediately, as soon as you got comfy for a second, it was just like rip it out again.
Right.
A gunman runs into the theater in this version, like a live play, whatever. But my God, I loved how floored and overwhelmed I was by this film and how good it was at that. So I think it's going to be maybe like a Tar, the way Tar was my favorite movie. Even though I was like, maybe I won't. I would put Everything Everywhere overall in the number one spot because it was more enjoyable and funner. This is going to be the movie that kind of haunts me the way that Tar did, and I'm going to want to keep revisiting and thinking about afterward. So yeah, all my love goes to Beau is Afraid. He needs it.
And that's great because again, knowing that this was your introduction to Ari Aster, I was so curious as to how you were going to take to it, and hearing how you are after the fact, it melts my heart because this is a director that I've been following for a while now, and you're just like, I can't do it because
I might not have seen it if it weren't for you. You were like, no, we're gonna do this and you're gonna be okay, and I went for it.
Yeah, because it is true. Like he starts his career off very horror centric and very, very terrifying. Like even now, like I'm glad you gave Midsommar a chance. I don't think I would ever recommend you watching Hereditary because it's just like one of those things where it's just like, oh, I don't know if you're going to be able to handle that because it is.
If you met Beau, would you recommend he watch Hereditary? I doubt it. Dude doesn't need that. Life is terrifying.
No.
Don't set the boy off.
Yeah, especially when you start introducing more of like the supernatural elements to all that stuff. And no, I know that's going to be a movie that will give you nightmares for sure. Not that this movie itself won't do that because it's more mental nightmare and more like, it could be in a way very relatable in its own way, as far as like what you go through in your own head sometimes in those certain situations, in those moments. So I'm so happy you love this movie as much as you did, and yeah, it's very true. I can see this being like that auteur type of film of the year that will always be on the top of our list, but when it comes to Oscar contention, it may be taken over by something else at the end of the day.
You get that little aftertaste of the nausea from watching. You're like, I just can't. I didn't love the feeling I had when I watched it. Yeah.
Right.
If there's something more enjoyable that comes out, probably not in Oppenheimer. I really hope that Barbie has that kind of effect where it's like it was really good and fun and lovely.
Right.
But damn, if this movie didn't affect me.
Yeah, yeah, and again with movies like the ones you mentioned, we still have Flowers of the what is it, the Scorsese
Killers of the
movie,
Flower Moon,
Flower Moon.
Oklahoma.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like that's I the more and more I see of that movie, the more and more I think like, wow, this is going to be like very very big. And whatever else we have coming out for the year. I mean, we're this is not the episode where we're looking ahead. We're looking back and we're enjoying our movies that we've seen so far this year. And perhaps in the next episode, we'll talk about the movies that we're looking forward to for the remainder of the year. But with that being said, those were our top movies of the year so far. How does your list rank compared to ours? Let us know in the comments. Let us know, like, if you gelled with some of our choices. Were you surprised? Were you shocked that maybe some movies that we didn't mention didn't make it? Like, I know a lot of you fans of Transformers and movies like, oh, I don't know, The Flash or Fast X. I'm
Yeah.
sorry we didn't mention movies like that on our list.
Cocaine Bear.
Cocaine
Polite
Bear.
Society.
Yeah.
Blue Jean is an indie one that I loved. You didn't have. Oh yeah, Joyride came out too late. That's right.
It came out in July.
Yeah. I almost put Plane on mine because it was such a
Oh,
fun
interesting. Okay.
madcap adventure. Knock at the Cabin was close for the Shyamalan.
That was a good one. Yeah.
I think I already mentioned Polite Society. I've got a few on my list, and then there's some that are like definite no's for me.
Yeah.
But if there's any Shazam heads out there or any 9-year-olds who love Super Mario Bros,
Hey.
Magic Mike's Last Dance fans,
Yeah.
the list gets worse from there. So I won't keep naming movies that don't deserve it. But
Right.
yeah, let us know. I'm curious. Tell me
Yeah.
why I'm wrong.
Yeah.
I want to know.
Yeah.
Tell me.
Voice off. Again, if you wanted to use that option, the voice message option on Spotify, please, I beg you, please try it. If you have just a slight hesitation, that means you should do it. Just go and do it.
Yeah.
Because
Right now.
yeah, like stop what you're doing, comment, and like leave the voice message, and it will be featured on a future episode whenever that will be. Because I just love moments like that. It's just so great to hear that type of interaction. And again, need to reiterate, our list here is movies that we enjoyed and that we thought were our best. We're not talking about impact on box office or impact in cinema or impact to like movies, like movie going experience in general. This is what we found to be the best movies of the year. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, these are the best movies of the year.
Okay,
your list
my
is
bad.
wrong.
All
Sure, you can own that. That's
All right.
on you though.
Okay, yeah.
Best movies of the year, everyone.
Yeah.
Official.
Apparently, I suck and I don't have
100% fact.
great taste.
I have the best movies list, and everyone else, if you disagree, sound off. 'Cause I don't know what. Tell me why.
But yeah, definitely let us know and tell us why Blake is great and I am a piece of shit. So
No, I'm sorry. Both of our lists are equally correct. We're both. These aren't opinions, though. That's all I'm trying to say. I'm not trying to say my list is right and yours is wrong. If you want to say yours is wrong, go for it. Don't tell me mine is.
No.
These are the best movies of the year.
That's it. Like, yeah, take my list, take Blake's list, combine it, obviously remove the duplicates, and this is your quintessential movie list of the year. You need to watch these movies, and that's
There's duplicates. See it twice.
Oh well, yeah, that you could do that too. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, let us know your thoughts and feelings and feedback in the comments below or voice messages. Please leave a voice message. But with that being said, that has been our episode of Movie Time this week. Again, a pleasure talking and discussing movies with you, Blake, and having this audience listen to us and spew our nonsense from time to time and speak truth, because that's one thing that we do.
Nonsense.
We speak the truth. But with that being said, where can people find you online?
Go to Letterboxd, last name Wolf. See my rankings for all these movies. Gave Joyride 4 stars, and all the ones that are in my top 10 probably got 5. I'm a movie lover. Sue me. Sound off. But that's where you find me though. Letterboxd.com, where all the movie lovers are.
There he is. That should be the Letterboxd tagline. Where the movie lovers are. Do they have a tagline right now? I don't think they do.
And
right?
it's actually not very. No, they do, and it's not that dissimilar. It's something like "Where We Love Movies" or something that, like, but it's worded better than that. So interesting. I said this one. this isn't the tagline, right? But it's the like Goodreads for movies. I always say that when people ask me about it. I'm like, but it's the better UI.
Interesting. Okay.
What their actual tagline is, they have a podcast, and they say something along those lines of like, this is where movie lovers, where we show love for movies, something like that.
I don't know. All that sounds like crap. I like what you said, and they should totally adapt what you said as their new tagline, where the movie lovers are, because that's really where they are. And it's a great community, and we welcome the community there. Again, a huge thanks to, if you are listening and you're one of the followers that recently followed me on there, thank you so much. I'm glad you found us on there. Don't forget to follow Blake too, because he has some of the best movie compilation lists that I've ever seen. Very entertainment and enjoyable. But LOWKEY Geek, the LOWKEY Geek. You can find me on Letterboxd, but most importantly, the LOWKEY Geek on Twitter, Instagram, Threads. We are on Threads, where I'm on Threads. I don't know if Blake is on Threads, but we're threading it up. We're enjoying our new threads. I'm threading the needle. What other puns can we say in regards to
I'm threatening you to please stop making more puns.
But yeah, definitely find me on Threads and follow me on there, because that is going to be the new hot thing, at least for the next week, until people get tired of it and revert back to Twitter. But obviously, most important is YouTube, Spotify, iTunes. Again, if you haven't done so, follow, subscribe, notification bell. If you want to further support this channel and the podcast, check out the affiliates that we have listed in the description. Any participation through those links helps support this channel and help us grow. But of course, any support you throw away, whether it's just subscribing or following, commenting, it's most appreciated, and it goes a long way to spreading the word and sharing the love that is us and MovieTime. So, all that out of the way, and all that being said, this has been MovieTime. I've been Renee. That's been Blake. Stay cool, stay classy, stay safe. We will catch you all in the next one. All right. Peace out, everyone. Bye-bye.